Hello, viewer slash listeners. Hi, how's it going? Welcome to the Magic Morning Wood. As always, I'm Ron, and with me is
It is me, Roger the Infernal Beast.
Hey Roger, how's it going?
Not bad, Ron. Yourself?
Good, not bad,
So
Roger.
just to clarify, are our listeners slashing on our viewers? Because that's kind of rude, right?
You're using slashes in the Britishism for peeing, right?
Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
because I don't say use slash in that context. So
Oh, I said no, you do. I've definitely heard you say
I've only
I'm
done it
on the
with
slash.
you because you use it, and so I use it
Ah,
as
you
a short form for you, but I would never say it normally in my
shouldn't
own real
ingratiate
life.
yourself.
Yes,
Right.
yes. I was trying. I was more of like a like please like me.
You're trying to make me feel at home after all
Yes,
these
I'm
years.
trying to make you feel like you jolly old England, mate.
Right. Are you from? Yes, because I'm from Botswana, of course. Um, so, so regardless, though, it's very rude unless, of course,
Right.
there's an agreement up front that you go.
Okay. Don't slash or pee on each other. Okay. That's the
Unless
PSA
that's
for
your
today.
thing, no kink.
Unless you yes, sure, yeah, no judgment. Right.
But
So
don't do it so near the
and
PC because you might
don't do it without getting permission first. Right. Okay.
and of course don't whiz on the electric fence.
Yes. Don't whiz on the electric fence.
So,
Anyway, we're going off topic. Here we are. So back to the Magic Morning Wood. So here we are, and we are continuing with our algorithm and our way of doing things, where we're talking about movies, and each movie we do has a strong or weak link with each other. So we kind of follow the chain. And the last movie we chose in our last episode, one that I chose was With Mill and I. And so I went pretty strong link for this one,
yes,
which was yeah, pretty much is almost the sequel in some ways. Yeah, with called How to Get Ahead in Advertising. Again, written and directed by Bruce Robinson, same writer director, right? And also again starring Richard E. Grant, and as well in this movie also has Rachel Ward and Richard Wilson and some other people.
Rachel Ward, who I have falsely accused in the past of being Megan Ward's sister,
Right.
but she's not at all.
I don't think so.
No.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't think she is. I think it's just another ward. Yes. So yeah, this
But
was
she is definitely Bert Ward's daughter.
Is it?
No, I made that up as well. But
Okay.
like, I'm imagining this family, or what a
And
fun
she lives
family
in
that would be.
and she lives in Shinjuku Ward.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway.
On we go.
On Tony Blair. Okay. So anyway, this was How to Get Ahead in Advertising from 1989.
8.
From the late 80s. And
Not
yes.
that late. There's still room left. There's a bit of buffer room there. Let's just say that much.
1989 and released in 1990. So there we go. Yeah. So anyway, filmed over some number of years in the end of the 80s. And yes, so this movie, okay, how do you talk about this movie? This movie, quick summary of this movie. Richard E. Grant is an advertising executive. He's kind of a hot shot, like he's like the really head of the advertising team, creative team, and he gets all the good stuff. He knows how to sell anything.
He's a little bit Gordon Gekko, isn't he? I suppose.
Yeah, Gordon Gekko kind of he's the best at what he does, and there's no one else but he's also kind of knows it, and he gets stuck on this particular skin cream. I guess it's like a
pimple cream, isn't it?
Pimple cream, right? So he's stuck, and he gets a block, and he can't figure out how to sell this pimple cream. And and so then through this stress, and he's going through all this stress and trying to figure out how to do this, and then he gets a kind of a pimple of his own on his neck that grows and grows and grows, and then becomes a second head that he starts talking to, and then that head
with a mustache as well, which I quite like.
with a mustache, yeah, the evil head, and then that head sort of sucks the blood out of his real head, and then takes over as the main head, right? And so he gets replaced. So, which is of course goes back to the pun in the title, which is how to get ahead.
Yeah,
ahead in advertising, right?
I also wonder if it's a reference or is totally coincidental to the 1959 film The Monster, which is like this US-Japanese co-production in which an American in Japan grows an extra head. And then, of course, it happens in Army of Darkness as well, right?
Yeah. Where they're doing the Three Stooges with himself.
In that case, it's definitely a reference to the monster, because that's something Sam Raimi would know about, right? But I don't know if it's just a coincidence or if Bruce Robinson, who's the voice of the head as well, right?
Voice of the
if he would have seen that film or not.
Right. Yes, and so lots of it's also quite satirical about the kind of like the state of the advertising business, and commodification, and using
kind of
consumerism, and
ends with this kind of rewrite of Jerusalem, right? A very pro-capitalist rewrite of Jerusalem, right? When he's walking along the fields of England, and you can hear the music, the Jerusalem music swelling, right? But he's changed all the words to, he's talking pro-capitalism, and just
actually, I didn't know what song that was, so I didn't get that reference.
Him, I suppose, isn't it?
A hymn. Okay, right. So it basically, so it's a big thing on that, and So did I miss anything? Anything else?
No, to be honest, it's kind of a fairly straightforward narrative, really, isn't it?
Right.
Yeah, if odd.
Right. So he gets this big boil on his shoulder. So, have you ever had a big boil on your neck like that?
No. I'm guessing you probably have, because things like that happen to you, right?
Yeah. Here's a question though. Again, speaking of Britishisms and differences we say in England versus, or in Britain versus other countries. Is a boil a pimple?
Well, that's interesting. You mentioned that. I think not. I think a pimple and a boil is a totally different thing.
I would say so too. So what would you say a boil is?
That's a good question. I mean, I kind of know what a pimple is. It's just something filled with pus, right? And a boil isn't necessarily. Isn't a boil more of a kind of like a reaction to something? Like you get boils, like for instance. Oh no, it's different from a blister, isn't it?
That'd be a blister, right? Yeah.
I don't know actually. Is a boil stress related, or is that, because that's obviously different from an ulcer? Again, we need some kind of medical expert.
We need a medical expert. Yeah, because we don't really use boils.
What would you say?
That often. We would just say, well, I would say pimple, but I mean, again, I'm not a dermatologist. According to Wikipedia, boil is like a infection of a hair follicle.
Okay. Well, it's not a pimple. It's definitely not a pimple.
Not a pimple, right? So, so it's like a.
And then you've got.
But it still has pus. But boils still have pus.
Right. Yes, I suppose they do. Hives as well is another thing. That's slightly different. That's like a allergic reaction to something.
It's an allergic reaction or a nervous thing, I think, as well.
Yeah.
So a boil, I guess, is like an infection of a hair follicle, whereas pimple is more to do with oil on the skin, I guess, or whatever, right? Something like that. So I guess it would be different. Anyway, pimples and boils, I guess, are
getting all itchy just discussing.
Right.
I've been quite lucky in my life in terms of, like, when I was a teenager, obviously I did have a certain amount of acne, but not that much. I think I've been relatively blessed with good skin.
Yeah, I was quite pimple ridden when I was actually I gross offshoot story. When I was a teenager, I had a lot of pimples. Actually, I still get pimples which I guess is not that common for men in their 40s, but I
Not on
still get.
your face, though, do you? Because I've never seen them on your face.
I do, yeah, I get them
Oh,
on my
really?
face all the time, yeah. So yeah, all the
Of
time.
course,
So
we get
so
hair makeup done before each show, so yeah.
right, exactly, yeah. So
We've been
yeah,
in,
it takes work to look this perfect.
yeah, we've been
Takes
in
work to look this good.
trailers hanging for a few hours, and then they
Yeah,
rush
yeah,
us into makeup and hair, and
yeah.
on set.
Yeah, I still get pimples all the time, which I guess is actually quite rare for a 40-year-old guy. There was a joke on the American Office where he was talking about how it was a really interesting thing that he was men in his 40s and he still got pimples. So I don't know. I thought it was a normal thing for me, but yeah, when I was a teenager, I had really bad acne, and I went on this medicine called Accutane,
Okay.
and Accutane is like you have to get like go to like a dermatologist and get a prescription for it and stuff like that. So and it's like basically just a pill, and it was like I remember each in like the foil, the one thing that we have to pop the pills out of the
Yeah.
foil
Yeah.
kind of thing, and on each single one there was like a "Don't take this if you're pregnant" warning, like so like
Oh,
each
okay.
time, right? So it was like really strong, right?
And
That's what I'm.
were you pregnant at the time?
I wasn't, so luckily at the time. At least I don't believe so. I may have miscarried, but
Right.
um. So I
Hey,
would
hilarious miscarriage humor here on the
miscarried.
Morning Wood.
Can't go wrong with miscarriage tumors. So I took these pills, and my skin got so dry
Ah,
that it dries out your skin. Basically, that's what the point is, right? So it dries out your skin, and my lips got so dry that I would have just like flaps of skin just hanging off of my lips that I would just cut them off with scissors because
wow.
there were just like giant like flaps of dead skin hanging off my lips.
Wow.
And then I
Glad
had to
you
go
took
get.
that medicine so you didn't look weird in school anymore, huh?
Yeah, right. And then I had to take I had to get like an actual like pharmacist to make like a prescription lip balm. Like you get like just a normal chapstick, but it was because it was so dry that I had to get someone actually to mix like a prescription lip balm that I would put on my lips like this, and you would see the difference in my skin between where I put like this vitamin E things, and then it would be so white and dried out here between the difference, right? So yeah, it
Wow.
was yeah, so it was pretty bad. And then even I stopped taking it, and of course it wasn't as bad, but I still get them even today, right? So
Your
so
skin was so dry you went and lived in a pyramid.
in a pyramid,
Yes.
yes, I was a mummy.
Thanks for
Um,
explaining the joke.
I didn't really get it. I was explaining it to myself because I didn't get it. So
Oh, I
why
see.
why a mummy?
Dry skin, yeah. That's what first thing you think of when you think of a mummy. Because they've been,
No, I think of bandages.
yeah, but under the bandages, they've been,
I wouldn't think of any skin at all, right?
yeah, they've mummified, like those mummies I went to see. Because they took all the organs,
Oh,
right? So they haven't putrefied,
right.
they still have the skin. Yeah.
Okay, what a random connection. It's not where I went, but okay. I was like, mummies? What does mummies have to do with it? Okay. Anyway, uh, so yes, that was my experience with pickles. I don't know why that's relevant, but yeah, that was this movie. So what's your experience with this movie, Clive?
Oh, how to get ahead in advertising. Yeah, so I think I must have seen this before I'd seen With Nil and I think.
Okay.
Because it would have played, it came out 89. So yeah, it would have probably played Channel 4 like 91, 92, something like that. So I think I must have caught the network television premiere of it. And I wouldn't have seen With Nil and I at that time. I might not even have been aware of With Nil and I. And maybe this was the film that made me aware of it, because I'm guessing when it was shown, and it was because the thing is, if I'm trying to, probably what happened was I saw a trailer for it being shown, because I might not have necessarily tuned into a film called How to Get Ahead in Advertising. I'd be like, oh, what's that? I'm not particularly interested in that. But I think they
Right.
must have run a ad for it, and you must have glimpsed the little head on a shoulder,
Uh-huh.
so it was looked kind of weird and interesting and horror-ish. So I would have sat down to watch it.
Uh-huh.
And yeah, I'm guessing in the write-ups it probably would have said from the makers of With Nil and I or something like that. And then I would have went, well, like, what's this With Nil and I? But yeah, I would have seen this totally cold, without any, none
Right.
of that With Nil and I baggage or anything like that. So I
Right.
kind of just yeah, I just uh took this film as it was, right?
Right.
And I remember thinking it was even back then. I remember thinking like, this is humor wise or satire wise, it's like it's a bit heavy-handed
Heavy-handed.
and not necessarily always firing on all cylinders and working. But I really appreciate, this is probably the first time I'd probably seen a full-on Richard E. Grant as well. So I probably appreciated his performance, and I appreciated the kind of weirdness about it. And probably I thought, it's a shame it's not better than it is, kind of thing. But I kind of had a soft spot for it just because it was quite weird and out there and unusual, right? Was this a first viewing?
It was, yeah. I like you. It's like the title doesn't really is. It's quite clever, I guess, after you've seen it. But I think it's doesn't really strike you as a movie that's really fun to watch. You know, and I always keep getting it mixed up with How to Succeed in Business Without Really Trying too. The other How to.
Right.
Right. So it's like, yeah. So I don't know. It was like, how do you get head in advertising? Well, I don't want to be in advertising. Why do I care? Right. So, but yeah, it was first watch for me. And so because we just watched With Noel and I thought, oh, okay, maybe I'll.
It's very different, isn't it?
It's very, very different, but same team, and also, Richard E. Grant, I developed a new appreciation for him, after With Noel and I and so that. So, and to be honest, watching this one, I actually, as we talked about last time, that With Noel and I probably requires at least one more viewing to kind of appreciate it.
Yeah.
I would say at least on the first viewing, I actually enjoyed this more than the first viewing of With Noel and I.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I can
yeah.
kind of see that. I can kind of see that. Yeah.
I mean, I get that it wasn't a perfect movie. There was definitely stuff that could have been tightened up, and some of the jokes went over my head or didn't fly, whatever. But and so, like, as I just already said, like, I didn't get the hymn at the end. I didn't get the reference. I didn't know what is he singing, and so I didn't really know what. I didn't get the satire there, right? So because point of satire is you need to know the reference point, and so I didn't know I didn't have the frame of reference for that one. So, but yeah, but I thought Richard E. Grant was hilarious. I think he's really, really funny in this movie.
No, that's one thing you can't. I mean, regardless of your overall feeling of the film, you can't fault Richard E. Grant. He goes for it.
He swings for the fences, and he's
got a really good sense of comic timing, I think, and he seems to understand. So it's interesting that what I found this time as well was, so I have to say, for me, it largely, rewatching it, it largely fell quite flat this time. Again, I kind of appreciate, the weirdness of it, but it didn't. I would say overall, it kind of doesn't work. But trying to pinpoint why it didn't work was difficult because some of Bruce Robinson's dialogue is actually very, very funny. Like, he's got a good ear for like the subtleties of things people say, and like there's a lot of good like 80s yuppie stuff, like when he's talking with his co-worker Richard Wilson, or his boss Richard Wilson, and he's like they're talking about scheduling something, and he says can we diarize on that, which is just like a great, very kind of 80s yuppie phrase, like, diarize, like, and there's a lot of stuff, there's a lot of very clever, quite funny dialogue, and I can imagine when you read the script you'd think, oh, this is good stuff.
Sure. Yeah.
But somehow it doesn't it didn't make me like the last, like, I could hear it and I thought that's quite a clever line, but there's some, I don't know what it is. It's very difficult for me to judge why, but it's just it's kind of flat, like it doesn't, I didn't laugh, and I'm not quite sure why it doesn't, because like we said, Richard E. Grant is just full on, and some of the dialogue's quite good. I'm wondering if there's a bit of a disconnect between the dialogue. It works in the With Noel and I context where it's all very low key. I think that kind of dialogue works better, right? Because it's in a more natural kind of environment. But this film is anything but natural and normal. Like, it's quite bombastic and over the top, and so I'm wondering if that's the thing, that the two things don't mesh, the kind of more subtle, low key, because like some of the things Bruce Robinson said as the Boyle as well are quite funny. Like,
Yeah, I thought the Boyle was quite funny. Yeah, and it
yeah,
was just a funny voice to have for a
yeah,
Boyle to have. Like
yeah.
it's kind of upper class,
And I
posh
love the
kind of.
fact that he has a mustache. That
Yeah,
actually,
yeah,
that cracked because you
yeah,
could just about see it. You don't see it at first, and he says, "And he's got a mustache." And then the next time you see it, you can see it does have a little faint
yeah,
mustache.
yeah.
It's quite funny. But I don't know. Yeah, it's weird. It's. I do appreciate it though, as like there's nothing else quite like this film. I'll give it that.
Mhm.
I can't think of anything else quite like it. But it doesn't
Yeah,
really work, I don't think. But you got some laughs out of it though.
yeah. I thought it was pretty funny. I was smiling through most of it, and I was like, yeah. I thought I appreciated his Richard E. Grant. I think you can't fault Richard E. Grant. I think
No, absolutely.
I think he really sold a lot of those lines, and I thought a lot of the lines were quite, as you said, quite clever, and I appreciated how he read them and stuff. So, um, but as I said, some of the references, the frame references, kind of went over my head, so I didn't get everything.
Mm.
But in general, I thought it was quite a clever little movie, and I thought it was very kind of it was fun. It was a fun watch. I can't say I was ever bored in this movie for sure.
Yeah, no, definitely not bored. But that's interesting because I think in general, I think it most people tend to side with me in terms of, with and I being very funny and how to get ahead is
Well, I think the problem is that Withnell and I is so revered now that probably the standards were too high for this one, right?
oh,
Because that
definitely, yeah.
yeah, I think everyone was expecting like like the world from this movie, and it was probably, I'm assuming, when it came out, a bit of a letdown
Yeah,
compared to what the people
yes,
wanted, right, or were expecting,
yeah.
kind of thing. But
Because
I
yeah,
thought it was still.
by the time this rolled around, yeah, the cult of Withnell had kind of started, right? Because it was very much
Hmm,
asleep, I think. But yeah, it would have been, and yeah, people would have been maybe expecting Withnell 2, right? Which
right, exactly, yeah.
definitely
So
isn't. In fact, the more I think about it, Withnell and I, in a way, seems to be a bit of an outlier in the Bruce Robinson, maybe because it's based on things that actually happened, so therefore it's anchored to a reality
mm,
that kind of. But most of the other things I can think of, he did kind of have that slightly more over the top kind of. For instance, I read his book. He wrote a book. He's written a few books, but he wrote a book called "They
who
All."
Richard E. Grant did?
Bruce Robinson.
Richard Robinson.
Called "They All Love Jack," which is basically his huge book. His attempt at solving the Jack the Ripper case. Actually, like Bruce Robinson is pretty.
Really?
Yeah, he's pretty confident he knows who did it,
Okay.
and he wrote this book, and it's an interesting read because he knows his Ripper law and he knows all the stuff, and that's kind of interesting. But what I noticed about it is it has a slightly Bruce Robinson has this slight kind of when it comes to because a lot of his kind of is this comedy of outrage in a way, right? Like
Mm,
something gets him angry, and that book's very angry because it's all very anti-Freemasons and stuff and secret societies and stuff like that. So
mm,
so he's constantly like berating the police and people for being corrupt or just stupid or putting their heads in the sand. But it's a very kind of
in Victorian London?
yes, but it's a very kind of one note outrage, which I don't know. It reminded me of like a bit like being stuck in a room with like an angry drunk or something for a long
Mm,
time, like amusing for a while, and then okay, I kind of got to get out of here, kind of feeling. Do you know what I mean?
mm,
So yes, and I feel a lot of his work is a little bit kind of his voice is overwhelming or something like you're just and this doesn't quite go there, but it does have that slight like very consistently on the nose anti-capitalist kind of anger behind it, right? But
right, yeah.
so I think with Nilla is oddly enough is a bit of an outlier in his, even though it's the thing he's most well
Mm,
known for, right?
mm.
Interesting what he does because he's got a few projects on the go, I believe, at the moment. So it'd be nice to see if he does manage to, if he manages to direct another film. because the one he made after this was Jennifer 8, right? That's the one he directed after this, which I don't know if you ever saw that, the
No.
serial killer film with Uma Thurman, blind Uma Thurman, and
Oh, Jennifer 8? Is that what it's called?
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, okay. I think I did see that then. So
yeah.
I thought I had a different name, Jennifer. Yeah.
Again,
Okay.
not very good, and apparently notorious for having been taken away from him in post-production and stuff like that.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and then he did the Rum Diary, right? With Johnny
Oh,
Depp.
yeah. Isn't that the one where Johnny Depp met Amber Heard?
That's right. That's right.
Yeah, that's infamous for that, right?
Yeah. So yeah, I think, but again, not a great film, but almost anything Bruce Robinson touches is definitely interesting. There's no doubt about that, but it's just whether the result is a success or not, I suppose. But I'm pleased that you kind of enjoyed this.
Yeah, I'd say I enjoyed it. It was a good fun watch. Yeah. Yeah, I do think, yeah, I agree. It was a little bit heavy-handed at times, right? But yeah, I think I just enjoyed the weirdness, and this kind of weird.
Yeah,
it was like this,
it is weird.
you know, yeah, funny kind of, I don't know how to say, like not like almost like it was like a dream. This whole movie kind of thing.
Yeah.
It's like it's like a fever dream when you're watching it.
I think that's what Richard E. Grant really comes into his own, I think, when he's doing like someone really trying to keep their shit together in a, like when he's doing that kind of, it's all right, because he's got the cardboard box and he's wide-eyed. No, I won't be needing a cup of tea there, thank you very much, because I've got a talking head on. Like, he's really good at doing that.
Where he's really trying to give, and like where like he like cuts to it, he's got the box on his head, like it's that was pretty funny. That was really
It's almost something I would imagine would work like if you rewrote it a little bit. I can kind of see it as like a on stage, like a monologue or something. Like if it was just Richard E. Grant with a box on his head, like
sure, yeah.
That would be
absolutely, yeah. I think it might work quite well with as a play, as a stage play.
Yeah, I think it would.
Yeah. If it's gonna get the head as a special effect, I guess. But yeah, I don't know. I enjoyed this. I thought it was fun. So
okay, cool.
I'm surprised that it's not more liked, but it both surprises me and doesn't surprise me, considering how like the cult of Withnail and I. So
right. Yeah, this is true. It is on the one hand, it's definitely in the shadow with Nell and I. But I don't think that's all of it. I think it is for me. It does fall a bit flat. But definitely the shadow of Withnail is definitely part of it in the wider cultural conversation, I think. Okie dokie then.
Yeah.
Right. So my link was slightly more tenuous than yours.
Yeah, I still don't even know what your link is, so I'm curious to hear it.
I got two films confused a little bit, so this is why this happened. So if you remember in With Nil and I, when they're in the Lake District, they go to a local pub where they meet the poacher and stuff, right? And the guy who runs the pub is the doddery, drunk old like ex-military guy. So
is that where he gets like the guy starts to berate him in the toilet, that pub?
No, that's a later, that was in London. That's the I'm calling you a ponce. That's the
that one.
No, later on in the Lake District where they the poacher and no, the barman, he's the guy who has that great line like when Richard E. Grant pretends that he's seen duty in Belfast, right? And he has that line, oh, a crack at the mick, eh? That's Noel Johnson, who was apparently once upon a time was actually quite a big name on the radio. He played Dick Barton, secret agent, on the radio back in, I don't know, the 40s or something. And I was looking through his filmography, and he played Judge in this film we're going to talk about, Frightmare. And I got Frightmare confused a little bit with the previous film that the same filmmakers made called House of Whipcord, in which a judge has a more prominent role. So I thought Noel Johnson was going to be prominent in Frightmare, but it turns out he's on screen for like a minute or less, passing down judgment at Yeah, so it begins in so this is a 1974 film directed, written, produced by Pete Walker, co-written, well, the main writer is David McGillivray. Walker and McGillivray kind of famous for being in that group of people who made kind of early kind of sex films in the late 60s, early 70s, kind of dodgy British kind of not sex comedies in the Confessions vein, but yeah, those kind of British sex films of the late 60s, early 70s.
Fun fact: I used to go to school with a David McGillivray.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
It's quite
I
an
don't think
unusual name.
Hmm?
It's quite an unusual name, isn't it, David
Is
McGillivray?
it
Yeah, I would have thought. I mean,
McGillivray? Yeah, I don't know. That was his name, Dave
I'm pretty
McGillivray.
sure
He
you
was a good.
didn't
He
go
was
to
a friend of mine. Yeah, he was from McGillivray. Yeah, so
I'm pretty sure you didn't go to school with this David, unless he was a very
probably not. Yeah, and I don't think any of us had that connotation at the time, so none of us knew that he had the same name as a famous.
Yeah, no, I would have been very surprised if
Yeah.
a young Canadian boy in the 80s would have said, "Hang on, as in Pete Walker, David McGillivray."
Yeah.
That would have been a very plugged-in young man.
Yes.
So yeah, so
But I'm surprised that maybe his parents didn't know that.
I wonder. It's such an unusual. Well, I don't. Maybe it's not. I mean, obviously David isn't. But McGillivray. Maybe it's a more well-known. Maybe it is a. Huh. Anyway, yeah, interesting though.
Yeah.
So, I mean, if you have said I went to school with someone called Pete Walker, I'd be slightly less.
Yeah.
Loads of those.
No, actually, yeah, he was one of my best friends in like junior high school, I guess it was. Yeah, yeah. So.
You still in touch with them?
No, I lost touch.
Just find him on Facebook and send him the link to this episode when it
Sure.
See what he has
Okay,
to say.
I will.
So yeah, so we begin with a black and white flashback to 1957, and I'm wondering, probably not, but did you by any chance recognize who our first murder victim was?
No.
This is Andrew Sachs, who played Manuel on Faulty Towers.
Oh, okay.
If you remember the hilarious Spanish waiter in Faulty Towers.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, that was Andrew Sachs, who more. So the other thing in more recent years was he became kind of in the news again, because do you remember the Russell Brand and Jonathan Ross scandal where they had like a radio show or something and they were interviewing Andrew Sachs, and Russell Brand had sex with his granddaughter or something.
With Andrew Sachs's granddaughter?
Yeah, and he mentioned it on air. He was like, "Yeah, I fucked your granddaughter, Andrew," or something like that. And it was quite a big scandal, and they had to apologize for it and all that.
Like
early Russell Brand controversy.
Well, why? Like, what? He didn't actually do it. You made it up, or
no, he had, but it was I mean,
what was the controversy?
Well, that he'd said to an old man live on air, "Hey,
I see.
fucked your daughter," like literally like that as well, right? Not.
So then he apologized by saying, "Sorry, I fucked your granddaughter." Like
actually, oddly enough, that is kind of what they did. They kind of fucked up the apology. Right?
Okay.
It was a big scandal back in the day.
Okay.
Yeah, storm in a teacup stuff, but
okay, yeah, sure, okay.
But apparently it was like Andrew Sachs did like complain and stuff, and because he was very rude and
right, okay.
Anyway, so yeah, so we see him. So it's set up that obviously some kind of murders have happened, and then enter Noel Johnson as the judge, passing down judgment as judges do. That this couple, who we don't see off screen, are going to be put into a mental asylum. Of course, we're not allowed to say that anymore. The politically correct term now is loony bin. So they're put in a loony bin.
Loony.
And until I don't know, until such a time as you're not mad anymore or whatever, right? So that's the setup. So there's a little bit of a slightly reactionary. You're still thinking about where loony is from.
Yeah. I just had one of those, like, it's I can see it on screen. I keep going. Sorry,
Right.
I'll look it up.
It sounds like is it a what's his name thing? Is it a how can I laugh at you? Is it him?
No, it was
Oh,
from a movie where it's someone like taunting someone, saying like, "Oh, she's a loony," and says, "Oh, don't talk about blah blah blah," like that way.
you
Loony, loony,
fuck.
loony.
Now you say it, I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, yeah. What is it?
Yeah. I'm gonna let it slide.
Anyway,
You
I
carry on.
need to know.
Right. Okay. So yeah, so it's a bit of a there's a bit of a kind of reaction.
Oh, yes, of course. Stand by Me.
There we go.
Yes, yeah, because it was
Yeah,
Corey Feldman's dad, right? Yeah,
yes,
yeah, yeah. It was the guy who owned Chopper.
yeah,
The guy who owned Chopper. He's like,
yeah,
"Oh, your dad's a loony. No, you
yeah.
talk about my dad like that."
That's right. There we go. We got to
Okay, keep going.
we got to the bottom of it.
Got it. Okay.
So yeah, and then fast forward 15 years later, and so Deborah Fairfax is well, she seems to work for the BBC as a makeup artist, and her friend Kim Butcher sets her up with a guy called played by Paul Greenwood, who's like an amateur kind of psychiatrist or whatever, and he takes an interest in her and her younger daughter, as played by Kim Butcher, who's a bit of a troublesome juvenile delinquent who hangs out with this violent gang of youths who beat people up. And then
Hooligans, if you will.
and so it turns out that
Ruffians.
also she's the couple. I mean, you piece it together, not real spoilers. You piece it together pretty quick that the couple are now living out from the pre-credit sequence are out of the loony bin, and they're now living in the countryside. He's like a chauffeur and she does like tarot readings. This is Sheila Keith plays our well, spoilers, cannibal kind of she's the focus of the film. Rupert Davis is her husband.
Is it a spoiler?
Well, I don't know. It's out there now anyway. So regardless, yeah, no, I agree with you. I think it's fairly easy to piece together, but yeah, I suppose it is supposed to be a bit of a surprise, right? So yeah, so the daughter is visiting them in their cottage in the country and bringing them like mysterious packages dripping in blood, and you're not quite sure why. And of course, it turns out they are this mad couple, and yeah, she's eating people. She's killing and eating people. She uses a power drill in a kind of pre-driller killer, bit of iconography there. So yeah, it's a kind of a weird, it's a bit kind of a mishmash of more kind of drab, down to earth kind of 70s kind of British kitchen sink drama, but with these occasional kind of flashes of colorful gore, I suppose. So it's kind of an unusual little setup for a horror film. How did you get on with Frightmare on? I'm assuming this was a first time watch for you.
Yeah, it was okay. Yeah, I just think it was kind of down the middle for me. It was, yeah, I mean, it was, I found it, I don't know, maybe I'd lost focus at some point or something, but I found it hard to kind of follow the story a little bit in terms of like the way, so the first credit sequence, it wasn't clear that it was a past thing, and I didn't know, like, and then the people, and then the hooligans, and it was like, the hooligans, the people from the credits, from the beginning, or like, yeah, so it was, took me a while to kind of figure out what was going on. But it was fine. It has its moments, but it's quite talky. There's a lot of the kind of like, there's quite a lot of like the slow moving plot, which is sometimes okay, but this one, it just felt like sort of like kind of just wanted it to kind of get on with it, kind of thing, right? There's a lot of like talking about stuff that didn't really matter that much. I was like, okay, let's get to the killing.
Right.
Yeah, so I wish it had been a little bit more kind of, it sort of like, it just felt kind of like it could have raised the stakes a little bit for me. I mean, like the stakes didn't seem like they were that high throughout the whole thing. I mean, it was fine. It was a decent watch, and it was, I was like, oh, okay, I got it, and on some good kills and stuff like that. But in the long run, it was just kind of felt me kind of like a meh. It was okay. It was fine. So
Yeah, it's interesting 'cause I deliberately didn't set it up in any way or tell you anything about it because I kind
Yeah.
of just wanted you to go in cold and kind of see. I agree with you as well. It does get slightly contrived towards the end when there's
Yeah.
a few kind of twists revealed about like how much the younger daughter knew all along and all that. You're like, well, hang on, how is that? I was trying to
Yeah.
work it backwards, like, well, that doesn't make any
Yeah.
sense if she knew the whole time this was. And it
Yeah.
doesn't really matter in the big scheme of things, but yeah, there were a few little bits that didn't quite add up. Yeah, so yeah, I wanted to revisit this one. So I actually saw this projected, oddly enough.
Oh, really?
Yeah, like about 25 years or so ago at a kind of horror film festival, Eurofest, and they had Pete Walker as a guest, and they showed a few of his films, including this one. And it's always had a little bit of a cult following, particularly in the UK, I think. And I kind of get, I think it's just the kind of the idea of a nice little old lady with a power drill is quite an amusing kind of
Yeah. I mean,
idea. And it's on the poster. The poster's kind of fun. It's got an old woman with a drill on it.
and she got like some blood. That's why I
Yeah.
thought I don't know if it was spoiled because she's got like blood coming down from her mouth and stuff.
Right, right. Yeah, no, they're not concerned about giving anything away on the poster. Right?
Yeah, right. Yeah.
And yeah, so it's got this kind of, and I remember, always when you see something in a room full of enthusiastic people and it's on a big screen, things always play better.
Sure. I feel better. Yeah. So
Yeah, so I'd seen this projected and I quite enjoyed it, even though I didn't quite go as mad for it as some people. And I'd seen some other Pete Walker films, and again, Pete Walker does have this kind of a cult reputation. I think there's a temptation a little bit when it comes back in the day, at least when it comes to British kind of horror fandom and stuff, where I think we're kind of so much. There's such a desire to grab onto something that's ours, right? That we
sure. Yeah. Canadians do the same thing. Yeah. So.
yeah, and then cheerlead a little bit. That sometimes things are given a bit too much agency that they might
Right.
deserve, right?
Yeah. Sure. Yeah.
So yeah, I would imagine there's a similar Canadian thing, right?
Probably
Yeah.
even more so because our cultural identity and history is a lot more tenuous and shorter and less clear than most other countries. So
Yeah. And the thing we have in common is we both share our more or less our first language with the Americans as well, right? So they kind of dominate on the world stage.
and
Yeah.
we are like right next to them, so they really dominate us as well.
Right. Oh, hang on. This is going down. Are we going down the Four Yorkshiremen sketch where we argue that we're more oppressed than the Americans? Luxury. I lived for 4 years in a paper bag in a septic tank.
I don't know that one, but it sounds good.
You know the Four Yorkshiremen sketch, Monty Python? Oh, okay. Oh, you
Monty Python. Okay, right. I'll have to go back and watch it.
I think, yeah.
It sounds similar to like the Romans, the Left for Brian, how much the Romans done.
Oh, okay. Slightly different, but yeah, but you get the tone of it, yeah.
Yeah.
But anyway, yeah, so there's that element of it, I feel as if it's people wanting to like it more than. And I remember reading about it over the years as well, after having seen it, and people mentioning because some people really love this, or some people really rate this film as almost like a classic of the 70s or something. And their take on it, I suppose, is that it's the fact that it is kind of drab and in that very 70s.
Has a really nice atmosphere to it. It's very quite sleazy and kind of dark.
Yeah. And people think it's the depressing nature of it is kind of, it's part of the satire and all. But the thing is, I'm like, well, I think that's just if you shot a film in Britain in the 70s on a low budget.
Sure, yeah, in the countryside.
Like this. I don't think you have to go out of your way to make it look drab and depressing, right?
Yeah. And then I think it's, I mean, again, I don't know the cultural the historical placement of this movie, but I feel like probably having a cannibal granny with a driller with drill was probably relatively new of an idea at that time, right? Right. So I think at the time probably it was probably quite notable, right? So now of course it's been done to death.
Absolutely, yeah. So yes, so for context, this would have been the first year. This has been the same year, sorry, that the Texas Chainsaw Massacre would have come out, right?
Right.
Kind of a different and a much more full-on film, but yeah, that kind of power tools thing. And
Right.
plus as well, just to further your point, which is a good point as well, is further context as well is let's say, for instance, at this time, I mean, there had been other more kind of urban modern horror films, but I think in the UK we were still in the shadow of like Hammer films, right? Hammer horrors, which is a very different kind of, slightly more cozy kind of
Sure. Yeah.
period, kind of in the past traditional horror. You know, Christopher Lee as Dracula. I love that stuff, but it's a very different beast to a
Right.
old cannibal old woman with a drill, right? It's
Really, yeah.
it seems more kind of potent and now and
Yeah.
modern.
I mean, even on the poster, it's got like all these like quotes of like shocked the critics with a question mark,
Yeah,
bloodthirsty, creepy, gory, brutal, and very nasty, horrendous chiller, a despicable film, frighteningly well made, a moral obscenity. And it was like,
yeah,
of course, by the today's standards, it's kind of like a meh. It was, but
No, I definitely think, people definitely, critics would have. I mean, I think they trashed it largely, but but with that level of not just it's like an outrage, like how dare you put, you know, Sheila Keith and Rupert Davis, and you got Leo Genn in there as well as like a Gerald Flood, you know, names that don't mean necessarily much to people now, but back in the day, you know, people would have known who they. I'm trying to think what the example would be. Yeah, I suppose it would be. Well, nowadays the world is different, so people wouldn't be shocked, but it would be like if you put Dame Judi Dench in a horror film with a chainsaw or something, you know.
sure.
But of course now
I
people
think that would be really
yeah,
funny. I mean, people
it
would
would.
be like, yeah, cheering that,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. So times have changed, but just for a kind of analogy, right?
Yeah, sure.
Laurence Olivier is a child rapist or something like that, or, you know.
Right.
Um,
It is
yeah.
dry skin.
No, but it's an interesting little. I find it an interesting time capsule, I suppose, more than anything else.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, it wasn't like a hard movie to watch. It kind of, it chugged along and, got the job done, kind of thing. So, I wish it had been a little bit tighter in some areas, a
Yeah,
little bit less talky but it got there in the end, and it was a cute little thriller, I guess, right? And especially historically, I'm sure it was a lot more notable though. So I think.
yeah. No, it's interesting sometimes to see these things and consider the original context and how they play now, and and like I said, I just wanted to kind of revisit it and see how it stood up, and I suppose that's all she wrote.
That's right.
Yeah. And so our challenge next time is to react to
This one.
Frightmare. So it'll be interesting to see what you come up with. I've got a few options. Decided which one to go. Oh, one thing should mention: there's a scene where they go to the movie theater, and you hear the movie on screen. The film you actually hear is the previous Walker and McGillivray and Sheila Keith film, House of Whipcord, which is also kind of an interesting film. But the marquee on the cinema outside is for the film Blowout, not the Brian De Palma film. It's a French film known as Le Grand Bouffe, which is a Marco Ferreri movie, which I'm
You're a grand bouffe.
Ha! Not as grand a bouffe as you.
As you.
So that's one way I could go, maybe, is to choose Le Grand. Because Le Grand Bouffe is a very interesting film about some French people who decide to eat themselves to death. Yeah, I won't say anymore, just in case I choose it. I don't know. Interesting film though. Interesting to see that. I didn't expect to see that on a marquee in Fright. So anyway, yes. So until next time, then. I don't have a tattoo, by the way.
Bon appetit.
Just in case any family members think I have a tattoo all of a sudden. I don't. You're hallucinating.